The brass bell above the door chimed softly as another gust of November wind swept into Carmine's, carrying with it the scent of impending snow and the muted sounds of Manhattan's Upper East Side. I clutched my order pad tighter, feeling the familiar ache in my feet that came with hour 6 of an 8-hour shift. 24 years old, and this was my life. Serving osso buco to women whose handbags cost more than my monthly rent, refilling wine glasses for men who didn't bother learning my name, existing in the margins of other people's evenings. Table 12 needs water, Marco hissed as he swept past me, his cologne creating a nauseating cloud in his wake. And for God's sake, Aria, smile. You look like you're attending a funeral. I forced my lips into something resembling pleasantness and reached for a water pitcher. My reflection caught in the ornate mirror behind the bar, dark circles under hazel eyes. Brown hair pulled back so tightly it gave me a headache, the cheap black, the dress that served as my uniform, hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight. I couldn't afford to lose. 6 months since my grandmother's death. 6 months of sleeping in a storage room above a laundromat in Washington Heights, saving every penny to pay off the medical bills that had piled up during her final year. Bills that kept coming even after she was gone, like cruel reminders that love always came with a price. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Aria, Marco's voice cut through my thoughts again, sharper this time. VIP in the private room. Owner's orders. You're on it. My stomach dropped. The private room at Carmine's was reserved for only the most exclusive clientele, celebrities who didn't want to be photographed, politicians conducting discreet meetings, and occasionally, people whose names never appeared in the society pages, but whose presence made even Marco nervous. Why me? I asked, my voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the dining room. Marco's expression was unreadable. Because you speak Italian, real Italian, not the menu Italian the rest of us fake. He gripped my shoulder, his fingers digging in painfully. And because Mr. Valentino requested someone quiet, someone who won't gossip. Dante Valentino. Even I knew that name, though I'd never seen him in person. He owned half the restaurants in Manhattan, along with construction companies, import businesses, and according to whispered rumors, a significant portion of the city's less legal enterprises, the kind of man who moved through the world with absolute certainty that it would bend to his will. I'd been at Carmine's for 3 years and had never once been assigned to serve him. None of the regular staff had. He brought his own people, conducted his business behind closed doors, and left generous tips that ensured everyone looked the other way. Don't screw this up, Marco added unnecessarily, releasing my shoulder. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, you forget it the moment you leave that room. Capiche? I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. The private dining room was located at the back of the restaurant, accessible through a narrow hallway lined with photographs of Carmine's 60-year history. My footsteps were silent on the plush carpet, but my heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. 2 men flanked the door. Not servers, not restaurant staff. Security, unmistakably, with the kind of watchful stillness that spoke of training and experience. One of them, broad-shouldered, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, held up a hand as I approached. Name, he said. Not a question, a command. Aria Russo. I'm supposed to serve ID. With trembling fingers, I retrieved my driver's license from my apron pocket. He studied it with an intensity that made me feel like a specimen under glass, then nodded to his companion, who opened the door. The private room was smaller than I'd expected, intimate rather than grand. Warm light from wall sconces cast everything in a golden glow. A single table sat in the center, set for 3 with the restaurant's finest china and crystal. And at that table sat 2 men who couldn't have been more different. The younger one, mid-30s, I guessed, rose as I entered. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean frame. Dark hair, slightly longer than conventional business style, framed a face that was all sharp angles and intensity, but it was his eyes that held me frozen, a deep, almost black brown that seemed to see straight through my carefully constructed defenses. Dante Valentino. Had to be. You must be Aria, he said, his voice a deep baritone with just a trace of an accent that spoke of Italian roots never fully abandoned. Marco spoke highly of your discretion. I managed a small nod, not trusting my voice. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary, something flickering in those dark eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or assessment. Then he gestured to the older man still seated at the table. My father, Giovanni Valentino. Giovanni Valentino was diminished in a way that spoke of recent illness. His suit, though clearly expensive, hung on a frame that had once been robust but was now frail. His skin had the grayish pallor of someone whose body was betraying them, and an oxygen cannula ran to a discreet tank beside his chair. But his eyes, the same deep brown as his son's, were alert and sharp, missing nothing. Buonasera, signorina, Giovanni said, his voice raspy but warm. Without thinking, I responded in the Sicilian dialect my grandmother had spoken exclusively during the final year of her life, when English had slipped away from her like water through cupped hands. Buonasera, signor. È un piacere servirvi stasera. The silence that followed was absolute. Dante had been in the process of returning to his seat. He froze mid-motion, one hand still on the back of his chair, his entire body going rigid. Giovanni's eyes widened, his weathered hands gripping the arms of his chair as if to steady himself. Repeat that, Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. Fear spiked through me. Had I offended them somehow? Marco had said I spoke Italian, but maybe Sicilian was per favore. Giovanni interrupted gently, though his voice shook slightly. Say it again, child. In Sicilian. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the order pad. Buonasera, signore. È un piacere. Where did you learn to speak like that? Dante cut in, taking a step toward me. There was something almost aggressive in his posture now, a coiled intensity that made me want to back away. Who taught you? My grandmother, I stammered. She was from Sicily, a small village near Palermo. She raised me after my parents died. What village? Giovanni asked, leaning forward despite the obvious effort it cost him. Corleone, I whispered, naming the place my grandmother had spoken of with such longing in her final days. The effect of that single word was electric. Dante's hand shot out, gripping the back of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. Giovanni made a sound that was half gasp, half sob, his hand moving to his chest. Papa. Dante moved immediately to his father's side, one hand on his shoulder. Breathe. Slow breaths. I stood frozen, uncertain whether to help or flee. Giovanni waved off his son's concern with a shaking hand, his eyes never leaving my face. What was your grandmother's name, child? He asked, his accent thickening with emotion. Her maiden name, before she married. Russo, I said. Her married name was Russo. But before that, she was. I hesitated, uncertain why this felt like I was Russo, revealing something dangerous, something that should stay buried. She was Maria Catalano. Giovanni Valentino's face crumpled. Tears, actual tears, began streaming down his weathered cheeks. He reached out with a trembling hand, and before I could react, Dante had guided me closer, until I stood directly in front of his father. Maria, Giovanni breathed, his fingers brushing my cheek with a touch so gentle it might have been a ghost's. Oh, Maria, you have her eyes, her mouth, even the way you stand proud despite carrying the weight of the world. His voice broke. You are her granddaughter, truly. I didn't understand what was happening. My grandmother had rarely spoken of her life before America, deflecting my questions with sad smiles and subject changes. All I knew was that she'd come here as a young bride in the early 70s, that something terrible had happened to make her leave, and that she'd spent the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, as if expecting the past to catch up with her. I don't understand, I managed to say. Your grandmother, Giovanni said, his hand falling back to his lap, exhausted by even that small gesture. Was she happy in America? Did she find peace? The question was so unexpected, so tender, that honest tears pricked my eyes. She was. She survived. She worked hard. She loved me. My voice dropped to a whisper. She died 6 months ago. Lung cancer. Giovanni's eyes closed, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. I am sorry, little one. So very sorry. Maria deserved better than the life we gave her. Papa, enough, Dante said quietly, though his eyes remained fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. You need to rest. We can discuss this later. No. Giovanni's voice carried surprising strength. Not later. Now. He looked at me again. Do you know any of the old prayers, child? The ones Maria would have learned as a girl? I nodded slowly. During her final weeks, when the morphine couldn't, quite touch the pain. My grandmother had recited prayers in Sicilian prayers I'd memorized phonetically, not fully understanding all the words but knowing they brought her comfort. Which ones? Giovanni pressed, leaning forward despite his son's restraining hand on his shoulder. The prayer to Santa Rosalia, I said hesitantly, and the one about finding peace when death comes, about returning home. I couldn't remember the formal name, but I could still hear my grandmother's voice, cracking with pain and longing, as she'd spoken those words in the darkness of her hospital room. Giovanni's breath caught. The prayer of the dying, he whispered. We call it U Prieru di lu Muredu in the old tongue. His eyes bore into mine. Can you say it? Please, child. I need to hear it. I glanced at Dante, who gave the slightest nod, though his expression remained unreadable. Taking a deep breath, I began to recite the prayer my grandmother had taught me, the words flowing in, the ancient Sicilian dialect she'd spoken in her final hours. Signori, quando veni la meura, quando luce si fa scuro, e la terra chiama, fammi tornare alla terra di lime patri, ogni li si presi cantanu e lumari para. Lord, when my hour comes, when the sky grows dark and the earth calls, let me return to the land of my fathers, where the cypress trees sing and the sea speaks. Giovanni's face transformed. The pain that had etched lines around his eyes seemed to ease, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. His lips moved silently, following along with words he clearly knew intimately. When I finished, the silence in the room was profound, sacred almost. Giovanni reached out again, this time taking my hand in both of his. His skin was paper-thin and cool, but his grip was surprisingly firm. You are a gift, he said softly, an unexpected blessing in these final days. Maria sent you to me, I am certain of it. Papa, you're not making sense, Dante said, though his voice had gentled. The girl is she is family, Giovanni interrupted, his eyes still locked on mine. Blood of our blood. Maria's granddaughter. He looked up at his son. Don't you see it, Dante? This is not coincidence. This is fate. Providence. Dante's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I saw the war happening behind his eyes, skepticism battling with something else, something that looked almost like hope. I should let you eat, I said quietly, trying to extract my hand from Giovanni's grip. I'll bring your water and— No, Giovanni held firm. Sit with us, child, please. An old man's request. Share our meal. He glanced at his son. Dante, pull up another chair. Papa, she's working. We can't just— I'm not asking you, son. I'm telling you. Despite his frailty, Giovanni's voice carried the unmistakable authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. This girl Maria's granddaughter will sit at our table. We will talk, and you will listen to what I have to say to both of you. The tension between father and son was palpable. Finally, Dante nodded once, sharply, and moved to retrieve a third chair from against the wall. As I sank into it, my legs weak with confusion and something close to fear, I realized that my life had just changed in some fundamental way I didn't yet understand. Giovanni hadn't released my hand. He studied my face with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely comforting, as if he were memorizing every detail. Tell me about her, he said softly. Tell me about Maria's life, the life she built away from us. The weight of Giovanni Valentino's request settled over me like a heavy cloak. Across the table, Dante had taken his seat again, but his posture remained rigid, watchful. One hand rested on the table, fingers drumming in a regular pattern that spoke of barely controlled tension. The other had disappeared beneath the table, reaching for a phone, I suspected, or perhaps something more dangerous. I don't understand what's happening, I said, finding my voice despite the surreal nature of the situation. Why does my grandmother matter to you? She never mentioned— Because I loved her, Giovanni interrupted, his voice cracking with emotion. Because she was promised to me when we were children. Because I lost her 50 years ago, and not a day has passed that I haven't thought of her. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You knew her? In Sicily? Knew her? Giovanni's laugh was bitter. I was supposed to marry her, child. Our families had an arrangement, the Catalanos and the Valentinos, united. Two of the oldest families in Corleone, bound by blood and tradition. His grip on my hand tightened. But Maria had other ideas. She fell in love with Aria Russo, a boy from Palermo with nothing but his charm and his dreams of America. Dante shifted in his seat, his dark eyes never leaving my face. Papa, this isn't... She ran away, Giovanni, and continued as if his son hadn't spoken. The night before our wedding was to be announced, she and Antonio disappeared. They got on a boat to America, started over with new names, new lives. His voice dropped to a whisper. Her family was shamed. My family was furious. It caused a rift that lasted decades. I tried to process this information, to reconcile the grandmother I'd known quiet, anxious, always looking over her shoulder with a young woman brave enough to defy her entire world for love. But you let her go, I said slowly. You didn't try to bring her back. Something dark flickered across Giovanni's face. I was young, angry, humiliated. I said things, did things. He trailed off, shaking his head. By the time I came to my senses, by the time I realized that love cannot be forced or claimed, she was gone, truly gone. I spent years searching, but Antonio had been clever. They vanished completely. Until now, Dante said quietly, his gaze shifting from me to his father. Until Maria's granddaughter walks into our restaurant, speaking the dialect of the old country, reciting prayers only someone from Corleone would know. The implication in his words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea about any of this. Marco just told me to serve the VIP room, and, we believe you, Giovanni said gently. This is fate, child. Maria sending you to us in my final days. Final days? I echoed, though the oxygen tank and his obvious frailty had already told me the truth. Lung cancer, Giovanni said matter-of-factly. Ironic, isn't it? The same disease that took Maria. The doctors give me weeks, perhaps a month if I'm fortunate. He smiled, and for a moment I could see the handsome young man he must have been. I've made my peace with it, but I confess, I'd hoped for one more chance to know something of Maria's life, to understand if she was happy, if her choice brought her the joy she deserved. The question hung between us, heavy with 50 years of longing and regret. I thought of my grandmother's life, the cramped apartment in Washington Heights, the late-night factory shifts, the way she'd flinch at loud noises or unexpected knocks on the door, the way she'd held me close after my parents died, whispering in Sicilian that we were survivors, that the Catalano blood was strong, that we would endure. Had she been happy, or had she simply been surviving, haunted by the life she'd left behind? She loved my grandfather, I said carefully. Antonio died when I was 5, but I remember them together, the way they'd hold hands while watching television, how he'd sing to her in the kitchen. I paused, choosing my words. But she was also afraid. Always. She never said of what, but I felt it. The way she'd never let me play outside alone. How she'd check the locks 3 times before bed. She lived like someone expecting the past to catch up with her. Giovanni's eyes glistened. The fear was my doing. In my anger, in my youth, I made threats. Sent word through the old channels that if she ever returned to Sicily, if she ever contacted her family again. He couldn't finish the sentence. I regret those words more than anything in my life. I hope she knew, in the end, that I'd forgiven her, that I wished her only happiness. She never knew, I said softly. She died thinking you still hated her, still wanted to punish her for leaving. The sound Giovanni made was wounded, animal. Dante moved immediately, his hand on his father's shoulder, his expression murderous as he looked at me as if I were the one who'd inflicted this pain rather than simply being its messenger. Papa, enough, he said firmly. This conversation can wait. You need to rest, to take your medication. No. Giovanni straightened despite the obvious cost. I need to finish this, while I still can. He looked at me with sudden intensity. You're alone, aren't you, child? Maria is gone. Your parents are gone. I have no one. The accuracy of his assessment stung. I have friends. My job. You have survival, Giovanni corrected gently. But not family, not protection. His hand tightened on mine. Let me give you what I couldn't give, Maria. Let me make amends through you. Warning bells rang in my mind. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to accept my protection, Giovanni said. To let my son watch over you as I should have watched over Maria. To take your place in the family that should have been yours by blood, if not for my foolish pride. Papa, no, Dante said sharply. You can't just... I can and I will. Giovanni's voice carried the unmistakable authority I'd heard before. Maria's granddaughter will not struggle alone in this city. She will not sleep in storage rooms and work herself to exhaustion. She will have what is her birthright: protection, security, family. My face burned. How did he know about the storage room? About my circumstances? Dante must. I have seen the question in my expression. My father makes it his business to know things, he said, his voice carefully neutral. When Marco mentioned a server who spoke fluent Sicilian, who'd been working here for 3 years but somehow never appeared on the schedule during any of our visits, he shrugged. We did our research. You investigated me? Anger cut through my confusion and fear. You had no right. We had every right, Dante countered, leaning forward. In our world, caution is survival. A woman appears who speaks the old dialect, who knows prayers most people in Sicily have forgotten, who claims to be from Corleone. His eyes hardened. That raises questions. Questions that need answers before we allow her near my father. So this whole thing, your father's emotion, the talk of fate and providence, was that all an act? Some kind of test? No, Giovanni said firmly. My tears are real, child. My regret is real. The joy of hearing Maria's prayers in her, a granddaughter's voice that is real. He glanced at his son. But Dante is also right to be cautious. We've built our lives on such caution. It's kept us alive when others have fallen. The others hung ominously in the air, a reminder of what I'd been trying not to think about: the reality of who these men were, that what they represented. I should go, I said, trying to stand. Giovanni's grip prevented it. I appreciate your offer, but I don't need protection. I'm fine on my own. Are you? Dante's voice was soft, dangerous. Tell me, Aria, may I call you Aria? Do you know there's been a man watching your building for the past 3 weeks? A man who follows you to work, who waits outside when you take your breaks. Ice flooded my veins. What? No, that's not. Dark blue jacket, gray knit cap, scar on his left hand. Dante continued relentlessly. He was there this morning when you left for your shift. He's probably there now, waiting for you to go home. I thought of the figure I'd glimpsed occasionally, hovering at the edge of my peripheral vision. I'd convinced myself it was paranoia, my grandmother's constant fear finally infecting me. But if Dante knew about him, if he'd been watching long enough to document details. Who is he? I whispered. What does he want? Dante and Giovanni exchanged a look, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Giovanni spoke. When your grandmother left Sicily, she took something with her. Information about certain families, certain arrangements, insurance, she probably called it. A way to protect herself and Antonio if anyone came after them. I don't know anything about that, I said quickly. Too quickly. Dante's eyes narrowed. Don't lie. You're not good at it. He was right. The truth was, I'd found something among my grandmother's belongings after she died, a leather journal, written in Sicilian, filled with names and dates and details I hadn't fully understood. I'd kept it, hidden in the bottom of my single suitcase, more out of sentiment than any sense of its importance. There's a journal, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know what it means. It's just names and numbers and... That journal, Giovanni interrupted, contains information that certain people would very much like to have. Information about the old arrangements between families, about money that was hidden, routes that were used, officials who were paid. He paused. Your grandmother was careful, intelligent. She documented everything as protection. But that protection has an expiration date. Her death made you vulnerable, child. Made you a target. The room seemed to tilt. A target for who? For anyone who thinks they can use that information, Dante said. Or who wants to ensure it never sees the light of day. He stood, moving around the table with predatory grace until he stood directly in front of me. The man watching you is just the beginning. There are others, families, who remember Maria Catalano, who know she had a granddaughter. They're circling Aria, waiting to see who makes the first move. Then I'll give them the journal, I said desperately. I'll hand it over, tell them I don't want any part of this. It's too late for that, Giovanni said sadly. The moment you walked into this room, the moment you spoke those prayers, you became part of this, whether you wish it or not. The families will know by morning that Maria Catalano's granddaughter has been seen with the Valentinos. They'll make assumptions, draw conclusions. What kind of conclusions? Dante crouched before me, bringing his face level with mine. This close, I could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine, that made my pulse quicken despite my fear. They'll conclude you're under our protection, he said quietly. That any move against you is a move against us. That's the only thing keeping you safe right now, Aria. The uncertainty about your status, about whether harming you would start a war. So make it certain, Giovanni said, his voice stronger now, animated by purpose. Let us formally take you under our protection. Move into one of our properties. Work for one of our legitimate businesses. Let it be known that Maria Catalano's granddaughter is family to the Valentinos, that her enemies are our enemies. The offer was tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Protection, security, an end to the constant struggle of survival. But at what cost? And in exchange? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake. What do you want from me? If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. In exchange, Giovanni said, you give me the privilege of knowing you in my final weeks. You let me hear about Maria's life through you. You allow me to make amends for my failures through ensuring her granddaughter's safety and happiness. That's it? I looked between father and son. Nothing about the journal? About the information? The journal stays with you, Dante said, standing. Locked in one of our vaults if you prefer, but yours. We don't want it, Aria. We want you safe. That's all. There had to be a catch. Men like the Valentinos didn't offer something for nothing, but when I looked at Giovanni's face, at the desperate hope in his dying eyes, I couldn't find the deception. I need time to think, I said finally. This is all happening so fast, and The door burst open with violent force, cutting off my words. One of the security men stumbled in, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Mr. Valentino, he gasped. We've got a situation. Multiple vehicles, armed men. They're demanding the girl. Dante moved with shocking speed, one arm sweeping me behind him while his other hand pulled a gun from a shoulder holster I hadn't even known was there. Giovanni remained seated, but his entire demeanor transformed the frail dying man, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. How many? Dante's voice was ice. 6 men visible, probably more. They've blocked both exits. They say they're not leaving without Maria Catalano's granddaughter, one way or another. My legs gave out. Dante caught me without looking, his arm like an iron bar across my waist, holding me upright against his side. Who are they? Giovanni demanded. The security man hesitated. They're flying Mancini colors, sir. The name clearly meant something to both Valentinos. Dante cursed in Italian, his grip on me tightening. Giovanni's face went pale. Damn, the old man breathed. They moved faster than I anticipated. You anticipated this? Dante's voice was sharp with accusation. You knew they'd come for her? I knew it was possible, Giovanni admitted. The Mancinis have the most to lose if that journal becomes public. They were always, I'm going to make a move. I'd hoped we'd have more time to secure her first. Well, we don't have time now, Dante said grimly. He pulled out his phone with his free hand, barking orders in rapid Italian. Then he looked down at me, his expression fierce. Listen carefully, Aria. In about 30 seconds, we're going to move. My men will surround us, and we're going to walk you out of here through the kitchen. There's a vehicle waiting in the alley. You're going to get in it without hesitation, without looking back. Understood? I nodded mutely, too terrified to speak. Good girl. Something almost tender flashed across his face before the warrior's mask returned. Stay close to me. Don't let go no matter what happens. More security flooded into the room, 6 men, all armed, forming a protective barrier around us. Giovanni was helped to his feet by 2 of them, the oxygen tank secured. Despite everything, he managed to catch my eye. You're family now, child, he said firmly, whether you've accepted it or not. And the Valentinos protect family, always. Then we were moving through the kitchen, where terrified staff pressed themselves against the walls, into the alley, where a sleek black SUV waited with its engine running, doors open. Dante practically lifted me into the back seat, sliding in beside me while Giovanni was helped into the front passenger seat. The doors had barely closed before we were moving, the SUV accelerating hard enough to throw me against Dante's side. Through the rear window, I saw men emerging from the restaurant, men with guns, with fury on their faces. Did they hurt anyone? I gasped, horrified at the thought of Marco or the other servers caught in whatever this was. No one who didn't have it coming, Dante said tersely, his arm still around me, holding me steady as the SUV took a corner hard enough to make the tires scream. The Mancinis are many things, but they're not stupid enough to harm civilians in a public restaurant. bad for business. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. I should have protested, should have demanded to be taken to the police, should have done any number of sensible things. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was, "I'll do it. Your father's offer. I accept." Dante's eyes met mine, dark and intense. "You're sure?" No, I wasn't sure of anything. But the alternative, going back to my storage room, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the Mancinis, or whoever else wanted that journal to make their move, was worse than any deal with the Valentinos could be. "I'm sure," I lied. Giovanni turned in his seat, his face transformed by relief and something deeper joy, perhaps, or the peace of a burden finally set down. "Welcome to the family, Aria Russo," he said softly. "Maria would be proud of your courage." As the SUV sped through Manhattan's streets, carrying me away from my old life and toward something I couldn't begin to predict, I touched the small gold cross at my throat, my grandmother's, worn every day since her death. "Forgive me, Nonna," I thought. "I hope I'm doing the right thing." The cross was warm against my skin, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I felt my grandmother's presence, her whispered words in Sicilian. "Coraggio, pixirida, coraggio." Courage, little one. Courage. I was going to need it. The safe house turned out to be a penthouse apartment in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern minimalism that seemed at odds with the traditional old-world men who'd brought me here. But it was the security that truly impressed or terrified, depending on how I looked at it. Cameras on every corner, guards at every entrance, locks that required both keypads and fingerprint scans. A gilded cage, however beautiful, was still a cage. "You'll stay here for now," Dante said as he gave me a brief tour. "At least until we've assessed the threat level and determined how to proceed. Everything. Our unit is already here, clothes in your size, toiletries, food in the kitchen." "Clothes in my size," I repeated slowly. "You really did plan this." "My father hoped," Dante corrected. "I prepared. There's a difference." He stopped in the doorway of what was clearly meant to be my bedroom, spacious, with a view of the city that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. "You're not a prisoner, Aria. You can leave any time you choose. But the Mancinis will be waiting," I finished. "Yes." I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. It had been less than 2 hours since I'd walked into that private dining room. 2 hours that had demolished everything I thought I knew about my life, my grandmother, myself. "Why did she never tell me?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "Why keep all of this secret?" Dante leaned against the doorframe, his tie loosened now, his jacket discarded somewhere along the way. Even disheveled, he radiated power. "To protect you," he said simply. "If you didn't know about the families, about the journal, about your grandmother's past, you couldn't be used as leverage, couldn't be forced to choose sides in wars that started before you were born." His expression softened slightly. "She must have loved you very much to deny herself that connection, to let you grow up thinking you were alone when you had an entire history behind you." Tears pricked my eyes. "I am alone. That history isn't mine. I'm just a waitress from Washington Heights who happened to learn Sicilian from her grandmother. I don't belong in this world. Don't you?" Dante pushed off from the doorframe, moving closer. He crouched before me, much as he had in the restaurant, bringing himself level with mine. "You're Maria Catalano's granddaughter. You carry her blood, her strength. You walked into a room with 2 of the most dangerous men in New York and held your own. You didn't faint or cry or beg. You negotiated. You thought strategically about outcomes and options." His hand came up, his fingers brushing a strand of hair back from my face in a gesture so unexpectedly gentle it made my breath catch. "You belong exactly where you choose to belong, Aria. The question is whether you'll let fear make that choice for you." His touch lingered, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with a feather-light pressure that sent shivers down my spine. This close, I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow. Could smell his cologne mixing with something earthier, more essentially him. "Your father's dying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And you're honoring his wishes by protecting me. But what happens when he's gone? Will you still consider me family? Or will I just be an obligation you're eager to shed?" Something dark and complicated flickered in Dante's eyes. "My father's wishes and my own aren't always aligned," he said quietly. "But in this case..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I watched my father grieve for Maria Catalano my entire life. I watched him carry the weight of his youthful mistakes, his cruel words, his foolish pride. He spent 50 years trying to atone for his failure to protect the woman he loved. His hand dropped from my face, but his eyes never left mine. I won't make his mistake. I won't let another Catalano woman slip away because I was too proud or too afraid to do what's necessary to keep her safe. Even if she's just a stranger, someone you met 2 hours ago? You stopped being a stranger the moment you spoke those prayers, Dante said. The moment I saw my father's face transform, saw decades of grief ease because of your kindness. He stood, putting necessary distance between us. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do about the Mancinis and the journal. For tonight, you're safe. I give you my word. He moved toward the door, and I found myself speaking before I could stop myself. Dante? He paused, looking back. Thank you, for getting me out of there. For all of this. His smile was slight, but it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, more human. Thank my father, he said. He's the one who saw in you what I was still trying to determine, that you're worth protecting, worth keeping. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. I sat alone in the beautiful bedroom, my mind reeling. Through the window, Manhattan glittered like a constellation of earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, men with guns were looking for me. Somewhere, the Mancinis were planning their next move. And somewhere, in his own room in this fortified penthouse, a dying man was finding peace because I'd reminded him of a woman he'd loved and lost 50 years ago. I pulled out my phone dead, the battery drained during my shift. They'd already thought of that too. A charger waited on the nightstand, perfectly placed. As I plugged in the phone, I noticed the drawer was slightly ajar. Inside, my grandmother's journal. They must have retrieved it from my storage room at some point, probably while Dante was distracting me with his proximity and his words. I should have been angry at the invasion of privacy. Instead, I felt only relief. If the journal was here, locked away with me, then the Mancinis couldn't use it, couldn't hurt anyone with whatever secrets my grandmother had documented. I pulled it out, running my fingers over the worn leather. My grandmother had held this, written in it, protected it with her life. And now I was doing the same, in a world she'd tried so hard to shield me from. Opening to a random page, I began to read. The Sicilian was clearer to me now than it had been months ago, my understanding sharpened by need. Names jumped out: Mancini, Valentino, Catalano, dates from the 1,960 seconds, 70 seconds, 80 seconds, references to shipments and payments and arrangements I only partially understood, but there was something else woven through the business details, personal entries. My grandmother's voice, younger and hopeful, writing about her love for Antonio, her fear of Giovanni's wrath, her grief at leaving her family behind. The 15th of October 1972. Giovanni sent word today. He says he'll forgive me, forget the shame I brought his family, if I come home without Antonio, if I admit my mistake and accept my place as his wife. But I cannot, will not. I love Antonio with a fire that would consume me if I tried to deny it. Better to burn in America than to live cold and dead in Sicily. The 3rd of November 1972. We've changed our names again. Antonio is now Michael Russo. I am Maria Russo. Our past died with the Catalano name, but I carry it still, in my heart, in my memories of cypress trees and the smell of the sea, in the prayers my mother taught me. The 20th of December 1985. She was born today, my granddaughter, Aria Maria Russo. When I held her, I wept. She has my mother's eyes, Giovanni's smile, though he'll never know it. I've decided she will learn the old ways, the old prayers, but she will never know the old dangers. I will protect her from our history, even if it means she grows up thinking she has none. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My grandmother had protected me, yes, but she'd also left me unprepared for this moment, for these choices. Had that been mercy or mistake? A soft knock interrupted my reading. Yes? The door opened to reveal Dante, changed now into casual clothes, jeans, and a dark sweater that made him look less like a mob boss and more like someone I might have passed on the street. Someone dangerously attractive, if I were honest with myself. I thought you might be hungry, he said, holding up a bag from what smelled like an Italian deli. I know everything happened fast. You probably didn't eat. He was right. I'd been halfway through my shift when everything had imploded. My stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, making my face heat. Dante's smile was genuine this time. Come on, kitchen, we'll eat, and I'll tell you about the Mancinis. If you're going to be part of this world, you need to understand it. The kitchen was a study in modern elegance, marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, and a breakfast bar that looked out over the glittering Manhattan skyline. Dante moved through the space with the ease of someone intimately familiar with it, pulling plates from cabinets and setting out the food with an efficiency that surprised me. You know your way around a kitchen, I observed, sliding onto one of the bar stools. My mother insisted, he said, unwrapping sandwiches that smelled incredible fresh mozzarella, prosciutto, roasted peppers. She said a man who couldn't feed himself was a man who could be controlled through his stomach. She didn't raise her son to be controlled by anyone. She sounds formidable. She was. Past tense. The single word carried weight. She died when I was 16. Aneurysm. One moment she was laughing at something my father said. The next. He set a plate in front of me. My father never remarried. Never even looked at another woman. He'd already given his heart to Maria Catalano. My mother knew it, accepted it, loved him anyway. The casual revelation of such profound dysfunction, a marriage built on the ghost of another woman, should have horrified me. Instead, I found it tragically romantic in the way only old-world families could achieve. Did you resent her? I asked, then immediately wished I could take it back. I'm sorry. That's too personal. No. Dante settled onto the stool beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. It's a fair question. And no, I didn't resent Maria. How could I? She was a ghost, a memory, someone who'd loved my father enough to run away with a man who had nothing. That kind of love. He paused, taking a bite of his sandwich. That kind of love is rare. My mother knew it. She told me once that she'd rather be married to a man capable of that depth of feeling, even if it wasn't for her, than to a man incapable of feeling at all. I picked at my food, my appetite warring with the anxiety that had settled in my stomach like a stone. Tell me about the Mancinis. Why do they want the journal so badly? Dante's expression hardened. The Mancini family has been a fixture in New York since the 50s. Legitimate businesses on the surface, waste management, construction, a few restaurants. But underneath, he pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo that he turned to show me. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, stood beside a construction site. Everything about him screamed respectability, from his expensive suit to his politician's smile. Roberto Mancini, Dante said, current head of the family. He spent the last 20 years building a reputation as a legitimate businessman, donates to charities, sits on hospital boards, has dinner with senators and judges. His voice dripped with disdain. But 30 years ago, he was his father's enforcer, the man who made problems disappear, and your grandmother documented every single problem he made vanish. Ice slid down my spine. I mean bodies, Aria. Witnesses who never made it to court, competitors who died in convenient accidents, prosecutors who suddenly dropped cases or lost evidence. Dante swiped to another photo, a yellowed newspaper clipping showing a warehouse fire. This one killed 3 people. The official report said faulty wiring. Your grandmother's journal apparently says otherwise. I set down my sandwich, my appetite gone entirely. How do you know what's in the journal? I thought you hadn't read it. I haven't, but my father has sources. People who knew your grandmother back in the day, who knew what she'd been documenting. He pocketed his phone. Maria Catalano wasn't just running from a broken engagement, Aria. She was running from a world she'd been forced to be part of, to witness. Her father, your great-grandfather, was deeply involved with several families, including the Mancinis. She saw things, heard things, and being the intelligent woman she was, she wrote them down. As insurance, I said slowly, understanding dawning, so that if anything happened to her or Antonio, the journal would surface, would make its way to authorities who might actually do something with the information. Dante nodded. It kept them safe for 50 years. But now she's gone, and the Mancinis know it. They've been waiting for this moment, waiting to recover the evidence that could destroy everything Roberto's built. So they'll kill me to get it. They'll try to acquire it first. Offer money, protection, threats, whatever they think will work. But yes, if those methods fail. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life, people going about their evenings, oblivious to the dangerous games being played in, of the shadows above them. I could just give it to them. Hand it over. Tell them I want no part of any of this. You could. Dante's voice came from directly behind me now. I hadn't heard him move. But do you really want Roberto Mancini to get away with murder? Multiple murders? Do you want your grandmother's courage, her documentation, her attempt to create some kind of accountability? Do you want all of that to be for nothing? I turned to face him, surprised to find him so close. He didn't step back, and neither did I. What's the alternative? Live in hiding forever? Constantly looking over my shoulder? The alternative, he said quietly, his eyes searching mine, is to use the journal. Not to destroy the Mancinis entirely, that would cause a war none of us need, but to neutralize them. To make it clear that if anything happens to you, if you so much as get a suspicious bruise, copies of that journal go to every law enforcement agency in the state. Mutually assured. Destruction, I murmured. Exactly. It's how peace is maintained in our world. Everyone has leverage on everyone else. It's messy, it's complicated, but it works. And your father? What does he get out of protecting me? Out of making the Mancinis his enemies? Something complicated flickered across Dante's face. My father gets to die knowing he finally protected a Catalano woman, that he didn't fail Maria's granddaughter the way he failed Maria herself. His hand came up, his knuckles brushing my cheek in a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. And I get to honor the man who raised me, who taught me that our word is our bond, that family is everything, that some things are worth fighting for even when the fight seems impossible. His touch lingered, and I found myself leaning into it despite every logical objection my mind was screaming. This was happening too fast. I didn't know this man, didn't know this world. I didn't know if I could trust anything I was feeling in the midst of fear and adrenaline and the surreal nature of the past few hours. But God, the way he looked at me, like I was something precious, something worth protecting not out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted to. What if I can't do this? I whispered. What if I'm not strong enough for this world? You're Maria Catalano's granddaughter, he said, his voice rough. Strength is in your blood, but you won't be alone. I promise you that. His thumb traced my lower lip, and heat pooled low in my stomach. Let me protect you, Aria, not because my father asked me to, but because the moment I heard you speak those prayers, the moment I saw you face down my father without flinching, something in me recognized something in you. Recognized what? My voice was barely audible. That you're mine to protect, he said simply. Mine to keep safe. Mine too. He stopped himself, his jaw tightening. I'm moving too fast. You've been through hell tonight. I should let you rest, let you process. But he didn't move away, and neither did I. Dante, I began, not even sure what I wanted to say. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. He stepped back, his expression transforming instantly from something almost tender to the cold mask of the businessman, the boss, the dangerous man I'd first encountered. One of his security men appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Then his expression darkened further. When? How many? A pause. Lock down the building. Full protocols. I'm on my way. He ended the call, his eyes finding mine. The Mancinis are here. They've somehow tracked us to this location. Terror gripped me. How is that possible? You said this place was secure. It is, which means someone told them. His voice was ice. Someone on my team sold us out. He moved to a panel on the wall, pressing his palm against it. A section slid open, revealing weapons, handguns, something that looked like a compact rifle, ammunition. Stay here. Don't open the door for anyone but me or my father. If someone else tries to get in, there's a panic room behind the bookshelf in the bedroom. The code is 1972, the year Maria left Sicily. You're leaving me? Panic crept into my voice. I'm going to end this. He secured a holster, checked a weapon with practiced efficiency. The Mancinis want to intimidate you, force your hand. I'm going to make it clear that's not an option, that you're under Valentino protection, and any move against you is an act of war. Dante, wait. I grabbed his arm as he moved toward the door. Don't do something stupid. Don't get yourself killed over my grandmother's journal. He turned, his free hand coming up to cup my face. I'm not risking myself for a journal, Aria. I'm risking myself for you. There's a difference. Then, before I could process what was happening, his lips were on mine. The kiss was fierce, possessive, nothing gentle about it. His hand fisted in my hair, angling my head exactly where he wanted it. His mouth claiming mine with a hunger that stole my breath. I gasped against his lips, and he deepened the kiss, his tongue sweeping into my mouth in a way that made my knees weak. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "That," he said roughly, "is so you know exactly what's waiting for you when I get back. So you know this isn't just protection or obligation. So you know that somewhere between that private dining room and this moment, you became something more to me than my father's dying wish." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed in my chest. I stood frozen, my fingers touching my lips where I could still feel the pressure of his kiss, could still taste him. Outside I heard shouts, the sound of multiple vehicles, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. My grandmother's words came back to me, whispered in Sicilian during one of her more lucid moments near the end. "The Valentino boy loved me once. I broke his heart. If I could go back, if I could choose differently." She'd never finished that sentence, her morphine-addled mind wandering to other memories. But I wondered now if she'd been trying to warn me, or maybe give me permission. The gunfire intensified, and I moved without thinking, not toward the panic room, but toward the weapons cache Dante had revealed. My hands closed around a compact handgun, heavier than I'd expected. My grandmother had taught me to shoot during one paranoid summer when I was 15. "Just in case," she'd said. "You never know when the past will catch up." Turned out she'd been right about that. I checked the weapon the way she'd shown me, found it loaded, and positioned myself behind the kitchen island with a clear view of the door. If anyone came through that wasn't Dante or Giovanni, they'd get a surprise. Minutes crawled past. The sounds from outside grew more chaotic, more vehicles, more shouting, the wail of sirens in the distance. Then, abruptly, silence. My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited, the gun steady in my hands despite my shaking. Footsteps approached the door. A keypad beeped. The lock disengaged. I raised the weapon, my finger resting lightly on the trigger guard the way my grandmother had taught me. The door opened. Dante stepped through, blood on his shirt, a cut above his eyebrow, but alive, whole. Behind him, 2 of his security men carried someone between them, unconscious or dead. I couldn't tell. "Jesus Christ," Dante breathed when he saw me, the gun trained on the doorway. "Lower the weapon, Aria. It's safe." My hands were shaking so badly now that I wasn't sure I could. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, gently taking the gun from my grip and setting it aside before pulling me against his chest. "You're okay," he murmured into my hair. "You're safe. It's over." "Is it?" I pulled back to look at his face. At the blood, his blood, I realized with horror. "You're hurt. You need a doctor." "It's nothing." Grazed by a broken glass when someone got overeager with their aim. His hands framed my face, his thumbs brushing away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "But you were ready. You were prepared to defend yourself. Your grandmother taught you well." "Who was it?" I asked, nodding toward the unconscious man being carried past us toward one of the bedrooms. "The traitor on your team?" "Marco," Dante said, and my stomach dropped. "The floor manager at Carmine's. He'd been feeding information to the Mancinis for months. When they learned about you, about your connection to Maria Catalano, he told them everything: your schedule, your habits, where you lived. And when my father brought you under our protection, Marco told them about this safe house." Betrayal tasted bitter. I worked with him for 3 years. "Money makes people do ugly things," Dante said. "The Mancinis were paying him well, but not well enough to die for them. He's going to tell us everything he knows about their operations, their contacts, their next moves, and then..." His expression went cold. "Then we'll decide what to do with him." I didn't ask what that decision might entail. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. What about the Mancinis themselves? Are they just going to back off now? For now, yes. I made it clear to Roberto that we have copies of the journal, that if anything happens to you, those copies go public. He's not happy about it, but he's practical. He'll leave you alone as long as you leave him alone. Mutually assured destruction. I repeated his earlier words. Exactly. Dante's hands slid from my face to my shoulders, his touch grounding. "But that means you can't leave our protection, Aria. You can't go back to your old life, your storage room, your waitressing job. The moment you're outside our sphere of influence, you're vulnerable." The reality of what he was saying settled over me. So I'm trapped, a prisoner in a gilded cage. Or, he said quietly, you're embraced by a family that wants you, that needs you, that... He stopped himself again. that familiar tightening of his jaw that suggested words held back. That what? I pressed. His eyes met mine, intense and honest. That I want, that I need, that I'm already half in love with, even though I know it's crazy, even though we've known each other less than a day, even though every logical part of my brain is screaming that this is too fast, too much. My breath caught. Dante, you don't have to say anything, he interrupted. I know this is insane. I know you're still processing everything, still deciding if you even want to be part of this world. But I need you to know that what I feel isn't obligation, isn't about my father's wishes or some debt to your grandmother. It's about you, Aria, the woman who faced down armed men with a gun she was terrified to hold, the woman who learned prayers in a dying language just to comfort her grandmother, the woman who's stronger than she knows. A throat cleared behind us. We both turned to find Giovanni in the doorway, oxygen tank in tow, but his color better than it had been at the restaurant. His eyes were knowing, amused, as he looked between us. I see my son has been keeping you entertained during the unpleasantness, he said dryly. Heat flooded my face, but Dante didn't release me. If anything, his arm tightened around my waist, pulling me more firmly against his side. Papa, he said, you should be resting. I'll have plenty of time to rest when I'm dead, Giovanni replied, moving into the room. Right now, I want to talk to Maria's granddaughter, to finish our conversation from the restaurant. He settled into one of the armchairs, gesturing for me to sit across from him. Dante reluctantly released me, though he remained close, perched on the arm of my chair in a position that was both protective and proprietary. You've had quite an evening, Giovanni said, his eyes soft with concern. Are you all right, child? I'm not sure, I admitted. Everything's happened so fast. This morning I was just a waitress trying to pay off medical bills. Now I'm apparently the heir to a Sicilian family legacy, being hunted by people who want to silence my grandmother's secrets. And I glanced at Dante, whose expression remained carefully neutral. And I don't know what I am anymore. You're a Catalano, Giovanni said firmly. That's what matters. Everything else, the Valentino protection, the arrangement with the Mancinis, the question of what role you'll play in our world, all of that can be figured out in time. He leaned forward slightly. But I need to know, Aria, can you forgive me? For what I did to your grandmother? For the threats I made? The cruelty of my youth? The question hit me harder than expected. This old man, dying and desperate for absolution, had shaped my grandmother's entire life with his actions, had driven her into exile, into a life of fear and hiding, had stolen from her the possibility of ever returning home. But he'd also loved her, and she'd broken his heart. My grandmother made her choice, I said slowly. She chose love over duty, freedom over security. She chose Antonio knowing what it would cost her. I met Giovanni's eyes. I can't forgive you for her, Mr. Valentino. Only she could have done that. But I can tell you that she spoke of Corleone with longing until the very end. That she never forgot the cypress trees or the sea. That she kept her Sicilian prayers alive and passed them to me. My voice softened. I think, in her way, she forgave you long ago. Otherwise, why teach me the language? Why preserve the culture? She could have let it all die with her. Tears streamed down Giovanni's weathered face. Thank you, child. You've given an old man more peace than he deserves. We all deserve peace, I said, even when we've made mistakes. Giovanni nodded, wiping at his eyes with a trembling hand. You have your grandmother's wisdom, her kindness. He glanced at his son, Dante. You'll make sure she has everything she needs? That she's comfortable here? Of course, Papa. Good, good. Giovanni struggled to his feet, waving off Dante's attempt to help. I'm tired. It's been a long night. But Aria, he paused at the door, looking back. I'm glad Maria sent you to us. Glad I got to know her through you, even if only for a little while. After he left, silence settled over the room. Dante moved from the arm of the chair to crouch before me, his hands resting on my knees. You gave him an incredible gift tonight, he said quietly. You don't know how long he's carried that guilt. I meant what I said. I think she did forgive him. I covered his hands with mine. But Dante, I need you to be honest with me. Is this real? What you said earlier about wanting me, needing me, or are you just caught up in the drama of it all, in fulfilling your father's wishes? His eyes darkened. You want honesty? Fine. He stood, pulling me up with him. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Aria. Ever since Marco mentioned a server who spoke fluent Sicilian, I've had people documenting your every move, learning everything about you. And with each report, each photograph, each detail, I became more fascinated. He began to pace, restless energy radiating from him. I told myself it was just due diligence, just protecting my father's interests. But then tonight, when I finally met you, he turned to face me. The way you looked at my father, the tenderness in your voice when you spoke those prayers, the courage it took to sit at our table when you were clearly terrified, the intelligence in your eyes when you were processing what we were telling you. He closed the distance between us again. And then later, when the Mancinis came, when I kissed you, Aria, I've never felt anything like that. That certainty, that need to protect, to possess, to keep you safe at any cost. That's not love, I said, even as my heart raced. That's obsession. Maybe, he conceded. Or maybe it's the beginning of love. The recognition of someone who fits into all the empty spaces inside you that you didn't even know existed. His hand came up, brushing my cheek. I'm not asking you to love me back. Not yet. I know it's too soon, too fast, but I'm asking you to stay, to give this a chance, to let me prove that I can be what you need. And what do I need? I whispered. Someone who sees your strength and doesn't try to dim it. Someone who understands where you come from and doesn't ask you to forget it. Someone who will stand between you and anything that tries to hurt you. His voice dropped lower. Someone who wants you not because of your grandmother's legacy or your bloodline, but because of who you are. Aria Russo, waitress, survivor, the woman who learned Sicilian prayers to comfort a dying grandmother, the woman who faced armed men with a gun she was afraid to hold. His words wrapped around me like a physical thing, warm and seductive. It would be so easy to give in, to let Dante Valentino sweep me into his world, his protection, his bed, to stop fighting and just surrender to the inevitability that seemed to be pulling us together. But my grandmother's voice whispered in the back of my mind, choose with your eyes open, Pixurita. Choose knowing what it will cost. I need time, I said finally. Time to think, to process. Time to figure out who I am in this new world before I can figure out if there's an us. Disappointment flickered across Dante's face, but he nodded. How much time? I don't know, days, weeks, however long it takes. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I said, you keep me safe. You teach me about this world I've been thrust into. You let me get to know your father in whatever time he has left. And you don't push. You don't seduce. You give me space to make a real choice. And if you choose to leave? His voice was carefully neutral. If you decide this life isn't for you? I thought about Marco's betrayal, about the Mancinis hunting me, about the journal full of secrets that made me a permanent target. Can I leave? Really? Or will I always need your protection? The journal is your leverage, Dante said. As long as the Mancinis believe copies exist, as long as they know attacking you means exposure, you're safe, whether you stay with us or not. His jaw tightened. I won't keep you prisoner, Aria. I won't be my father, making threats and demands that drive away the woman I... He stopped himself. I'll let you go if that's what you choose, even if it kills me. The raw honesty in his voice, in his eyes, made something crack open in my chest. This dangerous man, this prince of a dark empire, was making himself vulnerable to me in a way that probably terrified him as much as this whole situation terrified me. Okay, I said softly. Then we have an agreement. I stay for now. I learn. I decide. And you let me make that decision freely. Agreed. He held out his hand, formal suddenly. Partners? I took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Partners. He pulled me closer, until our bodies were nearly touching. But Aria, I'm going to fight for you, every day. I'm going to show you why you should stay, why this life, with me, could be something extraordinary. That's not giving me space, I pointed out, even as heat pooled low in my stomach at his proximity. I'll give you space, he agreed. But I'll also give you reasons to choose me. Consider it fair warning. Then he released me, stepping back with visible effort. Your room is ready. Everything you need is there. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out what comes next. For tonight, just rest. You're safe here. I promise. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the evening was crashing, leaving me hollow and shaking. At the bedroom door, I paused. Dante. Yes? Thank you. For everything. For protecting me. For being honest with me. For not making this choice easy. His smile was slight, but genuine. Easy choices are rarely the right ones, Aria. My mother taught me that. In the beautiful bedroom with its view of the city, I changed into the silk pajamas they'd provided my size, of course because Dante's preparation had been thorough. I climbed into bed with my grandmother's journal, intending to read more of her story, but instead, I found myself replaying the evening. The prayer I'd recited to Giovanni, Dante's kiss, the gun in my hands, the blood on his shirt, the promise in his eyes when he'd said he was already half in love with me. My phone buzzed, charged now, and showing a dozen missed messages from Ellie, my cousin, who I'd completely forgotten about in the chaos. Where are you? Marco said you left early. Are you sick? Soph, you're scaring me. Call me. If I don't hear from you in 1 hour, I'm calling the police. I typed quickly. I'm okay. Something came up. I'll explain tomorrow. Promise. Her response was immediate. You better. I was about to storm your storage room. I smiled despite everything. At least some things remained constant. Ellie's fierce protectiveness. Her refusal to let me disappear into my own isolation. But as I set the phone aside and turned off the light, I knew that nothing would ever truly be constant again. I'd walked into that private dining room as one person, a struggling waitress, with no family and no prospects. I was leaving it as someone else entirely, an heir to a legacy I'd never known existed, an object of both protection and desire to one of the most dangerous men in New York, a keeper of secrets that could destroy families and end lives. And somewhere in the space between those two versions of myself, I had to figure out who Aria Russo truly was, what she wanted, what she was willing to fight for. My grandmother's pendant grew warm against my skin, and I whispered the same prayer she'd taught me during those final weeks. Signori, datemi la forza per fare la scelta giusta. Lord, give me the strength to make the right choice. Outside my window, Manhattan glittered with possibility and danger in equal measure. Inside, I closed my eyes and tried to imagine a future I couldn't yet see clearly. One where I belonged, not by accident of birth, but by conscious choice. One where the dangerous, complicated man sleeping somewhere in this penthouse might become something more than my protector. One where I finally understood what my grandmother had felt when she'd chosen love over duty, freedom over safety, Antonio over Giovanni. And one where her legacy, the journal, the prayers, the strength that ran in Catalano blood, would be honored not by running and hiding, but by standing and fighting. Tomorrow, I would begin to figure out how. Tonight, I would simply rest in the unfamiliar safety of being protected by someone who claimed to want me for myself, not for what I represented. And if my dreams were filled with dark eyes and dangerous promises, with the ghost of my grandmother's approval and the weight of impossible choices, well, that was between me and the night. 3 weeks later, I stood at the window of what had become my home, not the storage room in Washington Heights, but Dante's penthouse, watching snow fall over the city like absolution. Behind me, I heard him moving through the space, speaking in rapid Italian to someone about business I was slowly beginning to understand. The legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the construction companies, the import operations, and the less legitimate ones that existed in shadows and whispers but were being phased out, slowly, carefully, under Dante's leadership. In 3 weeks, I'd learned more about my grandmother's world than in 24 years of living. I'd met the other families, attended dinners where power was negotiated over wine and pasta, learned to read the subtle tells that meant danger or opportunity. And I'd gotten to know Giovanni Valentino not as a threat or a stranger, but as a man. Complicated, flawed, but genuine in his love for my grandmother and his desire to atone for his mistakes. He'd grown weaker in those weeks, the cancer progressing despite the treatments, but he'd also grown lighter, unburdened by the confession I'd helped him make, the peace I'd helped him find. He's asking for you, Dante said, appearing at my side. His hand found the small of my back, a touch that had become familiar, comforting. He says it's time. I nodded, my throat tight. We'd known this was coming. The doctors had said days, perhaps a week at most, but knowing and experiencing were two different things. In Giovanni's bedroom, he'd insisted on staying in his own home for this final act. The old man lay propped against pillows, his breathing labored despite the oxygen, but his eyes were clear, lucid, as I took the seat beside his bed. Aria, he rasped, his hand reaching for mine. My beautiful girl, Maria's legacy. I'm here, I said, gripping his hand gently. I need you to promise me something, he said, his eyes shifting to where Dante stood in the doorway. Both of you. Anything, Papa, Dante said, moving to stand behind my chair, his hand resting on my shoulder. Take care of each other, Giovanni said, not because I asked for it, not out of obligation, but because what I see between you is real. It is worth fighting for. He coughed, a wet, painful sound. I lost Maria because of my pride, my inability to see that love cannot be commanded or controlled. Don't make my mistakes. Choose each other freely. Choose each other every day. I looked up at Dante, whose eyes had gone suspiciously bright. Our gazes held, something passing between us that needed no words. In 3 weeks, he'd kept his promise. Given me space, but also showed me who he was beneath the dangerous exterior. Show me the man who visited his father every day despite a schedule that would crush most people. Who'd quietly paid off my medical debt without telling me until I'd found out by accident. Who'd held me when I'd cried for my grandmother, for the life I'd lost, for the confusion of everything I was becoming. Who'd kissed me twice more, once in anger after I'd done something reckless, once in relief when I'd come back safe from a meeting with the Mancinis, but who'd never pushed for more, never demanded what I wasn't ready to give. We will, Papa, Dante said, his voice rough. I promise. Giovanni smiled, seeming satisfied. Good. Now, Aria, would you say the prayer for me? The one Maria taught you? I'd like to hear it one last time. With tears streaming down my face, I recited the prayer of the dying in Sicilian, my voice cracking but steady. Giovanni's eyes drifted closed, his breathing evening out into something that looked almost peaceful. When I finished, he whispered, Thank you, child, for giving an old fool the gift of forgiveness, the gift of knowing Maria's legacy lives. Ti amo. His eyes opened one last time, finding his son's. Ti amo, Dante. Be happy. Finally, be happy. Ti amo, Papa, Dante replied, his voice breaking. Giovanni's hand went slack in mine. His chest rose once more, then was still. In the silence that followed, as Dante made the calls that needed to be made, and I sat holding a dead man's hand, I felt something shift inside me. A decision made not from fear or necessity, but from understanding. My grandmother had chosen love over duty, had run away from a man who claimed to love her but wanted to control her, toward a man who loved her enough to let her be free. And I was choosing too. Not running away, but running toward a dangerous, complicated man who'd proven he could love without possessing, who'd given me the space to find myself before asking me to find him. 3 hours later, after the formalities were complete and Giovanni's body had been taken away, I found Dante on the penthouse balcony despite the cold. He stood at the railing, snow dusting his dark hair, his shoulders rigid with grief held back. I moved beside him, not speaking, just being present. After a moment, his arm came around me, pulling me against his side. He was ready, Dante said finally. He'd made his peace, but still, it hurts, I finished. I know. We stood in silence, watching the city below continue its indifferent dance. Life and death, joy and sorrow, all happening simultaneously in millions of apartments and offices and street corners. Aria, Dante said eventually, turning to face me. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're still figuring things out, but I need you to know. I put my finger against his lips, silencing him. I know. And Dante, I choose you. I choose this. Not because your father asked me to, not because I need protection or security, but because in 3 weeks, you've shown me who you really are, and I want more of that, more of you, more of us. The transformation in his expression from grief to hope to something fierce and possessive stole my breath. His hands came up to frame my face, his touch reverent. Say it again, he demanded. I need to hear it again. I want you, Dante Valentino, I said clearly. I want this life, this family, this love that's terrifying and complicated and nothing like I ever imagined. His kiss was different this time, not fierce or possessive, but tender, grateful, a promise sealed between snow-dusted lips in the cold New York night. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice, he said. I'm going to build you an empire. I'm going to protect you from anything that tries to harm you. I'm going to love you so thoroughly that you'll never doubt it for a moment." "I know," I said simply, because I did, with a certainty that defied logic, that transcended the short time we'd known each other. "But Dante, you don't have to build me an empire. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. Be honest. Love me as freely as I'm loving you." His smile was brilliant despite the grief shadowing his eyes. "Always, Aria. I'm yours. Always." As we stood on that balcony, the snow falling around us like a benediction, I felt my grandmother's presence, her approval, her joy that her granddaughter had found what she'd found with Antonio, a love worth any price, any sacrifice. "Grazie, nonna," I whispered in my mind. "Thank you for teaching me strength, for showing me that some things are worth fighting for keeping me safe long enough to find him." The pendant at my throat grew warm, and I could have sworn I heard her voice, soft and loving, whispering in Sicilian, "Coraggio, Pixirita, you chose well. He will love you as you deserve. Be happy." And standing in Dante Valentino's arms, watching our future unfold before us in the glittering lights of Manhattan, I believed that happiness was finally, truly, possible. Not the easy happiness of a simple life, but the profound, hard-won happiness of choosing love in the midst of danger, of finding family in unexpected places, of honoring a legacy while building something entirely new. The shy waitress who'd walked into that private dining room 3 weeks ago was gone, transformed by fire and fear and the discovery of who she truly was. In her place stood Aria Russo, granddaughter of Maria Catalano, keeper of dangerous secrets, chosen partner of a powerful man, and finally, beautifully, free. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, share it with someone who loves emotional tales, and subscribe for more stories like Aria's. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought. Did you see the ending coming? I read every single one, and your support means the world.